Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Coffee Shop Philosophy. I'm your host, Killian Hobbs, managing editor for Being Libertarian, LLC. You know our websites, you know our podcasts, you know you can follow me directly on Facebook just by searching Killian Hobbs Author. And you may have noticed that last week there was no episode. Unfortunately, a couple things came up. I wasn't able to quite get the time to record an episode for you, so apologies for that. If you were, waking up on the Thursday morning excited to hear my show, which I don't know why you'd be excited to hear me just randomly ramble about things, but if you happen to be the type of person that's entertained by that sort of thing, which I'm assuming if you're hearing this episode you are, then apologies for missing the episode last week. So I'm going to skip past all the normal stuff, and I'm just going to hop into today's episode. I had a different episode originally planned for you. I had a different topic I was going to go through, so you'll actually hear everything on that topic next week. Because I actually put some notes together and everything else to kind of prep for it. But with everything that's going on, I decided to do a bit of a different approach. Now, normally I stay away from the news cycle. I do it for a couple of reasons. One, because we have a podcast that's dedicated to the news cycle, Political Circus, that usually comes out on the Saturdays there. The second reason that I stay away from it is because 9 times out of 10, the stuff that comes up of it, it's a rehash. We're going through the same things and the same arguments over and over and over again. When the abortion topic pops up again, then the same arguments are going to come up for it over and over again. Whenever there's an election, all of here's the bad things this person did, here's the bad things this person did, here's the generic stances, here's the taglines, here's the slogans. It's all monotonous. That's really the best way to describe it, at least in my opinion. The process of discussing a lot of those things can be monotonous. Because even when there's, new laws coming in or new ideas that are being pushed out, 9 times out of 10, it's a rehash of arguments we've had before, or all of the rhetoric that's surrounding it is going to be exactly the same. A great example of this was a little while back when the Green New Deal was coming out. The entire push with the Green New Deal and the arguments back and forth for it and everything else, it was a parrot of the Medicaid for All arguments. It was a parrot of the Greenpeace arguments back in the 90s. Another great example is the whole push for just green in general. But again, it's all been done. It's a rehash at that point. So this time is a little bit different, or at least there's enough of it going on that I feel the need to kind of break down some of the problems I'm seeing with some of the... there's no polite way to put it, some of the absolute bullshit that is coming up on all sides. Even libertarians are falling prey to this crap regarding the 2 mass shootings that recently took place. So with these, for those of you that aren't aware, which considering how 24-hour news works, I don't know how you could be, there was recently 2 major mass shootings in the United States. There has been the regular response that you'd expect with the whole, gun control arguments and all this sort of stuff. But there's a lot of other angles that have been popping up with this one. And I'm just going to take the time to kind of go through each one that I've come across, throw in my 2 cents on it. That way, hopefully I can, and if anyone ever asks my opinion about it in the future when these arguments get repeated, I won't have to go through it all again. I can actually just reference this episode, show them what I was talking about, and just say, yeah, this has all been shut down before. So first thing we'll go into with it, with the 2 shootings there, is the political ideologies. Now, there's a couple angles when it comes to political ideology side. The reason that there are these different angles is because they weren't both the same mentality. They weren't coming from the same direction or anything like that. The first one, the El Paso one, he put out a manifesto where he talked about supporting Trump, but also being really afraid about automation and some immigration issues, and wanting to push a couple of different, what would be considered left-wing ideologies and other things that are pushing like far-right concepts. The guy was, other than being a Trump supporter, was kind of all over the place politically. So the idea that he was specifically this or specifically that, as far as the regular left-right spectrum's concerned, not really solid grounds for it. The second shooting was the person would be left. Was a very avid supporter of Antifa. A lot of his stances and supports that he had put out, just based on like Twitter history or Facebook history there, definitely showed that he was left-leaning. Both of these people have a more common connection, though. And I'll go through you know what? I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go through some of the connections that people are saying that they have. People are saying that it's white nationalism, that's the driving component behind it. Other people are saying that it's incel culture, based on just the physical appearance of the two gentlemen, because they look, I shouldn't call them gentlemen, I should call them fucking scum, let's be frank. I'm just so tired of seeing these things happen over and over again, and being polite doesn't really do us anything. So these two pieces of shit, to put it frank, they both white, pasty, kind of looked underdeveloped, I guess would be the best way to say it. Like they looked a lot younger than their ages should let them look. Glasses, even the same short brown haircut kind of thing going on. They looked like the stereotypical incel. They looked like if you ever seen those memes where it's, the Chad blank versus the virgin blank, they look like the virgins in this one. Which a decent chunk of mass shooters have that appearance. It's a really weird cross connection, but again, we'll get through all these things. So that's another connection that they said that they had. Another connection that apparently Trump has been pushing is the video game argument, saying that they were both gamers and that somehow video games drove them to do this. Which, I thought we killed these arguments back in the 90s. I just want to stress that, I thought we killed them in the 90s, and then I thought they were killed after Gamergate. I thought this was done. I thought it was sorted. I know Gamergate wasn't specifically about gamer violence, but that kind of brought the whole anti-video game mentality that people have to light, and it was all because of just some integrity in video game journalism that whole thing just completely blew up. But which, I still think, just as a side note, I still think that a lot of the absolutely just fucking mental identity politics and arguments that we see for, this group needs this and this group needs that, and down with this and up with this, and anyone that has a penis is evil, and if you were born white, you are the devil, and all this other just rhetoric, and also the rise of the counter rhetoric, where you've got the McTow types, and obviously the resurgence of white nationalism. I really think that while it was kind of simmering before that, I do honestly think that the whole Gamergate controversy really just shot that into the stratosphere and brought us, at least kicked us onto the path that kind of got us to where we are, where things just kept building up month after month, because that kind of exposed that entire thing. And it was the first time it was that heavy-handed and that heavy-handedly opposed. That's my 2 cents on that. I might, if anyone is interested, I might tackle that in a different episode and kind of go through the history and chain of events that I saw that as it proceeded from there. But they're blaming fucking video games again. Which, that's just, I don't even have words for it. That's just stupid. It's moronic to try to blame video games for that. But anyway, that's another point that they're trying to use as a link between these two people. And then, of course, all the name calling comes about, where they try to say, oh, well, this person was with this person connected to this person, all trying to point the fingers at either Democrats or Republicans to try to say who's most at fault for who's responsible, yada, yada, yada. I mean, one thing that's kind of pleasant to see is the fact that we haven't seen the mental illness argument that much with this one. Everyone got too absorbed in both the gun control arguments and the white nationalism / Antifa arguments that they kind of ignored, just kind of saying, oh, mentally ill, and moving on with their lives. Because, you know what, there's tons of people who are suffering mental illness in the world. Tons, especially in the West. There's definite issues in the West, considering how many people suffer various forms of mental illness in the Western world. And yet, when we look at it statistically, the amount of actual mass shootings that take place in the United States, when countered with the rest of all deaths, or even if you want to get specific, all homicides, and especially if you want to get more specific and exclude all non-gang related homicides, it's not to say anything ill of the victims or to kind of belittle the tragedies there, but it's a paltry number. It is what would be pretty much considered a statistically insignificant number. So, I think that's the first thing that we really should sink our bones into I meant teeth. Don't know why I said bones. Anyway, I think that's the one thing that we should really sink our teeth into, is that aspect of the gun control debate, is the whole, the mental illness angle, and then the actual just statistics on mass shootings. The numbers are very low. It's just a statistical fact. You can go through every registry, every organization that tracks the amount of total deaths per capita in the United States, and the amount of them that are from mass shooters or anything like that, it's paltry. It's a very small amount. The kind of craze that you see about mass shooters today is similar to the craze about Satanists in the 70s and 80s, and the craze that they had about serial killers in the late 80s and 90s. It's the exact same shock and awe. It's unsubstantiated fear, frankly speaking. And we can also see, if I can't remember where I saw it here, someone on Facebook had posted it a little while back, gun statistics from 1993, well, just death statistics in general from 1993 to today, and, from deaths from violent crimes in general has just been massively on a decline and have a continuous downtrend since the 90s. I mean, you'd think with everything getting crazier and crazier, at least that's the way that it feels or the way that it seems, that all of those would be spiking and that we'd have tons more violent crime now than we ever did. But it's not a fact. That's incorrect. Violent crime in the United States has been on a massive decline since 93. Mass shootings are the same way. Whenever you see the raw data on mass shootings, the numbers seem high. And the numbers seem high because they include any shooting where more than 4 people are involved. It doesn't even have to be 4 deaths, it just has to be 4 people injured with the shooting. Which, I mean, a mass shooting could be a person who snaps and lays waste to their family. A mass shooting could be a drive-by where they take down, 5-6 guys on a block. A mass shooting doesn't have to be a Walmart or a mall or a school or any of the other locations that they've taken place. That's not necessary for it. There doesn't have to be a kill count over 20. If you brought it down to that that high of an amount of deaths and worked from there, then statistically they practically don't happen. It seems like they do, but statistically they just don't really happen at that point when you consider the amount of firearms that are owned, the amount of people that exist in the country, because you have a massive country of 400 million people, which also makes trying to compare gun statistics with countries with populations of like 20 and 30 million or populations even maybe 100 million. It's difficult to make any kind of comparisons there just because of the sheer volume of people in the United States. that's the gun statistics. It's just the story that it's getting worse is just incorrect. Like it's not even a debatable topic. It's just people are incorrect in thinking that it is getting worse. Now let's swing over to the video game argument. The idea that it's video games that really push this stuff. I don't know about you, but I can't name a video game that I've ever seen in my life. I'm not that big of a gamer anymore. I used to be pretty heavy into video games a couple of years back, but up until a couple of years back, but not really anymore. But even then, I can't name a game that ever came out that would make me say, this was a really good game. I should sit down and write an entire manifesto about how I'm afraid of Hispanics. Like, it's the leap in logic that you need to have to think that that's going to be the case. To think that, this is what's causing it, is the fact that people are playing video games. As if Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger movies didn't exist. As if war movies didn't exist. As if, violence in literature is anything new. Violence in media in general is not a new thing. Because video games are a little more interactive, I could see that side of it, but this is another one that has been statistically proven wrong. There have been numerous studies over and over again about the influence of video games on youth, even the influence of video games on adults. And every single study has practically nothing to say about violent urges. Some have even been shown to have a form of almost therapeutic release because people can do stuff in the game that they aren't inclined to do in real life. It doesn't break down the barrier between what they're going to do in real life and what they're doing in the game. It reinforces it because it gives them an outlet for it so that they don't break that wall down. Otherwise, it's semi-bad for your eyes if you do it too much, but good for your hand-eye coordination. That's it. Again, this is another case where people let the fear of what's going on or the hype or they get swept up in everything. And these are questions we've answered before. This is not new. Like I've said, I avoid the news cycle because the rhetoric repeats itself. And this rhetoric has been statistically proven wrong. It is flat out incorrect. The thing that really bugs me with this one, right, especially with just the video game argument in general, the thing that really bugs me with it is the idea that only one medium could cause someone to do that. And it also tries to absolve the person from their crimes. Because it tries to say that the person is so weak-willed and so weak-minded that something as simple as playing some shooter game is going to be enough to set them over the edge and get them to go and kill a bunch of people. No, just no. That's incorrect. That is wrong. That is fucking stupid is what it is. The idea that someone is like that someone is simultaneously so weak-willed that a video game could influence them that heavily, and yet they write a goddamn manifesto and have the balls to walk into a place and carry their plan out from start to finish. You're going to tell me that that's because they're weak-willed? No. There's no way that meshes with reality. Another one we'll go into is the white nationalism side. White nationalism is a problem. If you're a white nationalist, fuck off. Just flat out, fuck off. Now, if you have a problem with those on the left that basically that continuously demonize white people, then I'm right there with you. Constantly hearing people say, oh, fuck white people, they're the devil, blah, 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 blah. you know what? Yeah, I would definitely look those people straight in the face and tell them to go fuck themselves, because that is racist. Like, I'm not going to, I can't agree with the prejudice plus power bullshit, because that's just a redefinition that was designed to hide racism so that they could use it against the people they didn't like, i.e. white people, and do so without fear of losing the power of their own word. Again, fucking stupid. Being against that, and a person taking that into full-on white nationalism, taking it to that extreme where they actually want to completely remove people of other races, taking it to the extreme of actually wanting to reinforce some kind of, quote unquote white culture. Why? What would that accomplish? What does that do? I mean, the people that cling to the accomplishments of quote unquote white Europe, most of the grand accomplishments of Europe came from either the Greeks or the Romans. And I'm sorry, if you've seen the Greeks and the Romans, they ain't all that white. We consider them white, but if we're talking just generic skin tone, if that's how you're classifying quote unquote white, then you know what? Not really fitting the bill. You're just kind of stealing the valor of their history because they happen to be on the same chunk of rock. It doesn't work. So the entire concept of just white nationalism in general, for tons of reasons, the racism of it is stupid. The short-sightedness of it is stupid. Nationalism in general is stupid, especially if it's racially focused, because we've seen that in history, and it never turns out well for either the race that are the nationalists or literally anyone else that's in the same country. It is a failed concept. If you want to try to defend against the identity politics stuff that tries to demonize people, again, 100% you'd have my support there. But if you take it that next step where you're going on the offense here and you're trying to embody that ideology, again, you've been proven wrong. You've been proven that the ideas that you have do not work. They have failed. This is history. Add it to the list of, can we get the fuck over this concept already? White nationalism is something that needs to just be, not even avoided. There isn't a strong enough of a word for just saying completely fucking utterly destroyed. If there was a way to put that into one word, that'd be really good. But unfortunately, I don't have such a word available. And the other part, applying it to this particular set of shootings. Well, the problem with doing that is, was the guy racist? Like the Walmart shooter? Yeah, he was definitely racist. He had a problem against Hispanics because he saw them as part of the issue with automation and immigration and the general loss of jobs. That's how he saw it, so that's why he attacked. Okay. Does him being racist immediately mean he's a white nationalist, though? No, it doesn't. Other parts of his manifesto could definitely lead to that, but the main reason that we're hearing the cry about white nationalism is because he was against Hispanics and he supported Trump. And apparently that's all it takes to get that label nowadays, when there's people who are actual white nationalists, and those actual white nationalists need to be opposed. It's the same thing that happened with the word bigot, with the word misogynist, with the word, even with the word racism. It's been overused in areas where it doesn't belong, and because of that, those words have started to lose their meaning. Not a lot of people care if they hear someone on the left throw the word racist around anymore. They should. Racism is a fucking horrible thing. So when they hear that they're being called a racist or something like that, that should have an impact. That should matter. That should be something that makes them stop and think. But because of just how overused it is, it lost its meaning. It doesn't have the same impact that it used to have. Again, same thing with white nationalism at this point. And that ignores the Antifa guy, the second shooter, who Antifa obviously didn't claim him because, of course not, but he was a definite supporter of all the far left shit. Looked the same way, kind of, same type of shooting, from the looks of things, wasn't racially motivated or anything like that, at least from what I've seen, but it shows that it's not just one thing. There's tons of different reasons why you have people who do these types of shootings. I mean, people forget the shooting in the gay bar a couple years ago. Same idea. Like, it's a completely different reason for it. And in that one, you couldn't blame it on, general hatred of gays. You couldn't blame it on Islam. You couldn't blame it on anything like that because the guy was a little loose in the head because of some of his own internal, fights that he was having. And that led him into being an utter piece of shit and shooting a bunch of people in a horrific act of violence. And again, we went through these arguments last time. And we'll go through these arguments again next time. As soon as they find any inkling that it leads to one person or another, we're going to run into these exact same arguments. So just to summarize where we're at so far. The gun statistics prove the hype wrong. The video game thing, it's been proven to be bullshit. The white nationalism thing doesn't explain the second guy at all. Just doesn't explain the second guy at all. And really shouldn't be the focus considering all of the other factors that are involved. Yes, white nationalism is terrible. And yes, the guy probably was in some way associated. Based on his writings, nothing jumped out that said 100% yes, but it pointed out that he was definitely a racist, but it didn't point out that he was 100% into that category. And we need to make sure that we're categorizing these things properly so we know exactly what we need to attack. That's the key reason for making that kind of differentiation, is to make sure we know what it is that we're attacking. The last bit that I'll go into is we're seeing a whole bunch of Republicans coming out now trying to defend some form of quote-unquote common sense gun control. Well, this is something where, studies have been done. You know what? You don't even need the study. There was I'll try to find the source so that I can include it in the show notes if I can. But there was a study on a person that studies specifically gun violence who has said in most cases that if there were more people who were armed, the shooter would be less inclined to start shooting because they wouldn't want to get shot after, taking 3 shots, hitting nobody, and then just getting shot and being killed, because they wouldn't be able to accomplish what they want. So if we're having different types of gun laws to try to restrict people, like the Republicans are currently fighting for, which, what the hell is 2019 that we've got the Republicans fighting for the gun rights now? And then we've got people on the far left that are in the Antifa group that are telling the Republicans to fuck off. They want to keep their guns. How the hell did that switch? Anyway, so we've got that going on now where the gun control argument comes up again. And again, it's a case where, we've been through this song and dance. We can go through the arguments about how an armed populace is going to be better defended, which declines the, it makes wanting to shoot, wanting to do a shooting, less attractive for these people, because the chances that you're going to pull it off and get what you're looking for out of it become slimmer and slimmer when there's more people who can pull a gun on you and shoot you. That's just logic at that point. There's the Second Amendment arguments that go with it. And the one of the scarier ones is something that Trump was talking about trying to put together some sort of algorithm to be able to identify potential shooters ahead of time. I'm assuming that he just watched Minority Report and really liked the movie, and that's where he's getting this idea from. But just imagine that. They want to put forward a software that tries to pre-identify potential shooters. So that is to say, they want to create a system where they can potentially catch people before the crime is committed. So they don't even know if the person's actually going to commit the crime. They just want to database anybody that they think could possibly do it. So that's, I don't really need to say, if you're listening to a libertarian podcast, I don't really need to say exactly why or how that is an absolutely horrific idea. And most likely in any incarnation will probably end up being a violation of both your Second and Fourth Amendment rights. But one more that I'll throw in here, another one is the responses from people. Every response that I've seen so far has been standard and canned. There's only been a few people that have actually said something that actually was separate or different. One of our writers on Being Libertarian there, Logan Davies, he put out a piece that he shared through Facebook there where he talks about the political divide and the divisiveness and the hatred that builds up from that being a potential cause for this. Not the politics of one particular group or another, but just the divisiveness of politics in general. That could be a driving point. And there's some merit in that driving point. Neil deGrasse Tyson, the entirety of Twitter just jumped at him because he had the audacity to post statistics and data. He posted with the average deaths in a 48-hour period based on other categories other than shooting, and pointed out that sometimes we get taken in by the spectacle when we need to review the data. The general response was telling him to fuck off because he had the audacity to present data. Think about that. He had the audacity to present information, and people told him to go away and take his information with him. The one that kind of just had me in stitches, though, was AOC. She'd retweeted a thing from a different follower, but it involved the New York Times running a headline that says Trump urges unity versus racism. Because Trump's gone on record, especially after the shooting, basically saying that white supremacy is fucking stupid. And she decided to just say that white supremacy is aided by the cowardice of mainstream institutions. So here you have AOC trying to say that the New York Times is trying to support Trump and white supremacy because of the way that they titled an article they put out. A very plain English article title that there's no way you could word it differently without being just completely implicit in your bias. And they were mad that the New York Times wasn't biased enough in their reporting that Trump said we need to fight against racism. She was mad that they said Trump wants to fight against racism. My question, and I ask this as an outsider to the United States. For those of you who don't know, I'm Canadian. I'm not American. So I get to see all the things that happen with America, but I, in many cases like this, luckily, am not directly party to it. I'll leave this episode off with a question, a very simple question. What happened? Like, honestly speaking, what happened in America to lead it to where it is today? And I don't mean to say that as if it's a big doom and gloom thing. Like I said, that's not the real, like the tragedies that happened. You know, we've been through the statistics, everything else, and, you know, they're still horrific. And there's still tragedies, and they still deserve coverage, and it's still important to get to the bottom of what happened and find out, you know, who did it, why they did it, so on and so forth. It's important to get through that stuff. But how did your country reach a point where the arguments around this and the rhetoric and the discussion serves no point anymore? There's no point to talking about the nuances of, say, the video game argument, or of gun control at this point, or talking about, whether racism is bad or not. Newsflash, it's fucking stupid. There's nothing new that's being interjected into these arguments or into these conversations, and yet we cycle out of them. As soon as the news cycle switches, the arguments get dropped, and everyone forgets whether their ideas were proven right or wrong last time. They just move on to the next thing. The last thing that I'll leave this episode off with, and I need to clarify ahead of time that I don't buy into the conspiracy theory on this. I'm just saying it to make sure that we don't forget. Let's make sure we're not forgetting the Epstein bullshit that's going down right now with all this going on. Let's make sure that doesn't get swept under the rug because the media stops reporting on it. Find outlets that are keeping up on it. Keep up on that story, because some very powerful people are most likely going to fall because of that. And if nobody's keeping an eye on it, then it'll get cleaned up probably very quietly. Very similar to the Panama Papers, if you remember that one. The massive fraud ring through a whole bunch of millionaires and billionaires and politicians across the world. Thousands of them that were caught, just flat out caught. And some journalists that died getting the information, or died after they got the information and exposed it. And that story went absolutely nowhere. Nobody heard of any court cases or anything actually happening with the people. It just, story disappeared after about 2 or 3 weeks of the hype with it. Similar thing with the developments on the Julian Assange story. These are stories these are the kinds of things that shape the world. When we actually keep up on them and we see how far they go. Letting the news cycle decide what we care about, that accomplishes nothing for us. So, to end everything off, if you're going to look into someone's politics, try to get it right. Don't try to overprescribe or try to overreach into something that might not be there. And if you're going to do that, at least make sure that your evidence is actually laid out. 2, actually have evidence. Actually have an argument for what you're going to say. Actually be able to back it up and have a way of describing and explaining what it is that you're trying to say about your point. And 3, be willing to actually listen to other people who are willing to give you the same considerations. I think we could get rid of a lot of the rhetoric around a lot of the general news items that we see if we were capable of just having a goddamn conversation again. If we could do that, chances are a lot of these problems would end up sorting themselves out just by having improved our culture that much. So, with all that said, I do have a good episode planned for you next week. I'll go into everything for that next week once I get out of dealing with the news cycle here. It'll be a little more traditional, the stuff that you listen to on my show. You can follow me on Facebook just by searching Killian Hobbs Author. This will hopefully be the only time that I have to make any commentary regarding the tragedy that took place and all of the bullshit that's popped up in the news related to it. And as always, if you liked what you heard and you'd like to hear more, I'll see you again next week.